In 1720, Britain's brightest minds and most powerful figures unknowingly walked straight into a massive financial trap. Fortunes were wiped out, reputations were destroyed, and people's trust in money and government was shaken. And it wasn't just ordinary people who fell into this trap. Politicians, nobles, and even Isaac Newton himself, a man who could calculate the movements of the planets, found himself at the center of one of the greatest economic disasters in history, the South Sea Bubble. Here's the unsettling part. This story is not a mistake left behind in the past. The same mechanism that deceived people 300 years ago is still walking among us today, because the South Sea Bubble wasn't just a story of greed. It was a story of how money and power together can create a massive illusion. And that illusion can catch anyone, no matter how smart they are. To understand this bubble, we first have to understand Britain at the time. The country had just emerged from the War of the Spanish Succession. The war had drained the treasury and left the state buried in debt. The debt was so enormous that even interest payments were suffocating the budget. People had begun to ask, will these debts ever really be paid? It was in this environment that the South Sea Company appeared in 1711. The official story was captivating, a monopoly on trade with South America. At the time, people in London imagined South America as a treasure chest filled with gold and silver, waiting to be discovered. But the reality was very different. The company's real business wasn't trade at all. The real goal was to make government debt disappear on paper. The plan was simple. The company would take over the state's debt, and creditors would receive shares in return. In other words, debt would be converted into stock. People were promised both a share of future trade and regular income backed by the government. On paper, everything looked perfect. The state relaxed. Creditors were hopeful. The company gained power. But the core problem was this. The promise of wealth was largely an illusion. Most of South America was under Spanish control. Britain's actual trade rights were almost symbolic. There was no real river of gold, just a good story, and people love good stories. By 1720, the company had turned into a full-blown advertising machine. Pamphlets were distributed, whispers spread through back rooms, and people were told, this opportunity will never come again. Even members of parliament took a share and chose to look the other way. Company directors hinted that those who got in early would become rich. The result? Everyone bought in. Within a few months, shares rose from $100 to nearly $1,000. The country was mesmerized. Merchants, aristocrats, clergy. Everyone wanted to board this train, including Isaac Newton. Newton entered early, made money, and got out. But as prices kept soaring, even he couldn't resist returning. What if I'm missing even more? He thought. When the bubble burst, he lost the equivalent of millions of pounds in today's money. His famous remark later summed it all up. I can calculate the motions of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of men. That sentence captures the shared truth of every bubble. Intelligence does not save you when you follow the crowd. The way the bubble grew was simple. As people bought, prices rose. As prices rose, more people rushed in. Parliament stayed silent because they were part of it too. When even the king became head of the company, the whole thing began to look official. People mortgaged their homes, went into debt, and told themselves, an opportunity like this won't come. Again, it was no different from today's crypto or meme stock frenzy, but the underlying reality hadn't changed. The company wasn't making money. Dividends were paid using the money of new investors. From start to finish, it was an illusion. And like every illusion, it eventually collapsed. Toward the end of 1720, confidence cracked. People began to ask questions. Share prices fell. Panic spread. The same herd psychology that had driven prices up now dragged everything down. The result? Fortunes vanished. Savings were wiped out. Lives were turned upside down. But not everyone suffered equally. The powerful, politicians and nobles, were protected in one way or another. Their losses were compensated to keep the system standing. Small investors were left alone. That's why this wasn't just a financial disaster. It was a profound injustice. When the scandal exploded, public anger was intense. Investigations were launched. Some company directors were turned into scapegoats, their assets seized. But the system itself didn't change, because the state couldn't afford to destroy the structure that financed it. Even the Bubble Act, which appeared to protect the public, was actually designed to eliminate the South Sea Company's competitors. Even in crisis, the rules were written for the powerful. And the story doesn't end there. The dot-com bubble of the 1990s, the housing crisis of 2008, the recent crypto frenzy, they all follow the same pattern. Big promises, a new era narrative. The claim that this time it's different, and then a massive collapse. Every time the outcome is the same. Small investors lose, big players survive. This is the real lesson of the South Sea bubble. The problem isn't that people are stupid. The problem is that the system keeps producing these manias over and over again. If even Isaac Newton was wrong, no one is immune. That's why the real lesson is this. No one is coming to protect you. Not experts, not politicians, not regulators. You can only protect yourself. How? By keeping your distance from promises of easy wealth, by separating value from excitement, and most importantly, by thinking twice whenever you hear the words, "This time it's different." Because history tells us one thing. It isn't. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And the rhyme of the South Sea bubble can still be heard today. If this story gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.